What is up, guys? Raziel here, and today I want to bring you a video that has to do with Final Fantasy XIV's community. There's a lot of people online that say it's one of the best, especially compared with other popular MMOs, and I wanted to explore why that is and why Final Fantasy has the reputation for having a good community at all. Are there no assholes that play Final Fantasy XIV? Well, obviously not. I'm an asshole. I play Final Fantasy XIV, but I digress. This video is going to get into it, so without further ado, let's fucking hit it.
I am Raziel.
Alright, so here we are, talking about the wonderful and flawless Final Fantasy XIV community. Of course, let's be realistic, there are some pricks in there. But before I get into Final Fantasy XIV specifically, let's explore kind of the history of MMO communities and what it all meant and how it got to where it is today, to where there is such a huge difference between a helpful community and a toxic community. It's no secret that throughout my history of videos, if you take a look at them, that I don't have the highest opinion of the community of a game like World of Warcraft, but that wasn't always the case. So what happened? Well, to start off, I think what encourages or discourages a game to having a bad or a good community is the mindset the game sets up. I like to think of it as, is the game designed around the community versus the game, the players versus the enemies in the game, or is it set up as a community versus the other members of the community? And I think that's one of the biggest things that has caused such toxic communities in a lot of different games, not just in the MMO genre. So let's explore what encourages good behavior and what encourages bad behavior. And to start off, I want to say that bad behavior generally stems from things like massive amounts of anonymity, no accountability to the player at all for anything they say or do in the game, and no incentives to be a good person. It is my belief that human beings in general, when given an option of whether they're going to do something nice or do something not nice, in a case of a vacuum of total anonymity, where no one knows who they are or anything about them really, people generally choose to do the shitty thing. People will be assholes if they're given the choice and will face no repercussions for it. But I've also noticed a strong link between PvE and PvP content. But I keep getting off track here, but what I want to go into is the first MMO I ever played as an example of how communities were and how they've changed over time. The first community MMO that I was ever part of, the first graphical MMORPG, was a game in 1999 called Asheron's Call. Now, Asheron's Call was... there's no game like it on the market today. It was very, very unique. It was very... its character design and everything, how the game was designed, was you very much could do things on your own. Obviously with a party is easier, but you could ultimately become the most powerful person in the game and kill anything on your own. Its systems, its skill systems was very, very based off of Dungeons and Dragons type systems where you just get points and make each certain skill stronger, etc., etc. But that's not what we're talking about. What was the community like in Asheron's Call? Well, the community was probably one of the most amazing gaming experiences I've ever had in my life. Extremely, extremely positive. Does that mean there were no pricks and no assholes in the game? Absolutely not. Of course there were. But what pushed a game like Asheron's Call to be good is the fact that it was a game that had no raids. It had dungeons, but they weren't instanced. You could, if you went into a dungeon that had 30 other people playing in it, they would be in there too. And there were no quests. There were no people, not quests in a traditional sense as we know it today. You would have to explore the world and talk to NPCs to figure out hints of how to start these quests. There were no NPCs with big exclamation points over their head and shit like that. You had to rely on your fellow players to find where the coordinates and locations to where dungeons were, where the best places to hunt were, where the best places to level were, how to complete a quest, how to go. This is long before data mining was a thing. So the community was overwhelmingly positive because people needed to help each other to better themselves, to become more successful in the game themselves and more powerful. And this encouraged a strong sense of community on each server, especially when the patch that would come out every month and the big enemies and terrible things that the players had to fight in Asheron's Call were actually not just NPCs, they were player characters controlled by developers. Developers would log in and guide the story along and roleplay as these enemies, with their unique avatars or whatever, and you'd fight them, and it brought servers together. Now, the only real area in Asheron's Call where toxicity entered the community was when it was in the PvP scene. PvP in that game, you had to do a long quest to pretty much sell your character's soul to the main enemy of the game, and then you were flagged to kill other players, and most of the toxicity came from players against players, them talking shit, fighting each other, and stealing each other's loot, because when you died, you dropped your loot. So that's where toxicity was really focused in that game, and it got worse when they later added PK Light, which was you didn't have to do that long quest, and there were no penalties to dying in a player versus player battle. So I feel like Asheron's Call, when to what I referenced earlier, was very, very, very much community versus the game. And then after that, when I started playing Dark Age of Camelot, now it was a PvP-centric game. However, the toxicity was very low in that game from my personal experience, because you wanted to help the other players get stronger, because it was a 3-faction game. Faction versus faction at max level, and even mid-levels you would try to hold keeps and areas that other factions wanted to take. So there was a very strong sense of camaraderie and brotherhood, sisterhood, what have you, within each realm, within each faction, to help each other out, to become stronger, to defend the game. And it helped that when the PvP battles occurred, a bunch of factions colliding, you couldn't talk to the other faction at all. Not even like, Keck. You couldn't even type something that was the other people would understand. If you typed something, it would just say they say something, and you have no idea what it means. And that actually helped stave off a lot of the negativity in that game. It was a great community. It was a fun community to be a part of. And again, there were no like huge giant raids or things like that. That was, the entire world was controlled and discoverable by the player base themselves. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit, to World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft Vanilla, specifically Vanilla and the Burning Crusade. It had its faction versus faction. I would say the faction versus faction World of Warcraft right from launch was more toxic than the faction versus faction in Dark Age Camelot. But by no means would I say that World of Warcraft was a toxic community in Vanilla and largely during part of Burning Crusade. Because you had faction pride, whether it was for the Alliance or for the Horde, and you were trying to help each other become better, and but then things started to creep in throughout near the end of middle Burning Crusade, end of Vanilla, when I saw there has always been elitists in games, but it sort of became noticeable to me as a huge thing was near the end of World of Warcraft, when my guild was raiding Max 40. This just sense of entitlement, in the sense that my shit doesn't stink, and all the kind of fucking crap like that started to seep into the game. But it didn't really hit its peak until the major add-ons became focused around DPS meters. If you don't do X-Man DPS, you're garbage, you're shit, you're worthless, you should drink Drano, kill yourself, whatever. And then it got really bad in Wrath of the Lich King, when they completely removed anonymity. So in games like Asheron's Call, games like, when they jacked up the anonymity, but in games like Asheron's Call, Dark Age of Camelot, Vanilla WoW, Burning Crusade WoW, you had server accountability. Your name carried weight. If you were a good player and you were also a nice guy or a ladies, you would get, people would know who you were. you had a reputation to uphold, a reputation to, you know, and the people that were cocksuckers, everyone knew who they were too. Wouldn't want to group with them, wouldn't want to party with them, and they fucked themselves. You couldn't just go drop money and change your name or change your server. And in fact, on World of Warcraft, for the first few years of release, you couldn't even roll a Horde character and an Alliance character on the same server. If you were Alliance and you wanted to play Horde, you had to go to a different server to play your Horde character. There was accountability in the community, which helped uphold it and made it more positive than it was negative. But in Wrath of the Lich King, with the release of LFG and server transferring and name changes, all that was lost. You no longer had to protect your reputation. You could just, $10, your name's changed. You could fuck people over, you know? I mean, ninja looting was a thing since vanilla, and it was extremely toxic, but you blacklisted yourself back then. By the time all the anonymity was put into the game, it didn't matter. You could ninja loot all day and get away with it. No one would know who you were and what happened. It wasn't against terms of service. And that's where I feel like the toxicity in that game really started to take off, and it has only gotten heaps and heaps and mountains worse, and it doesn't help that most of the expansions since Wrath have been complete shit and further fuel the hatred, you know, and negativity in that game. But again, this is not a video to just rant on World of Warcraft. I've done that plenty. You can see my other videos if you want to watch that. But now let's talk about Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy XIV has an amazing reputation, you know, that it's one of the best MMO communities on the market right now. And why do we think that is? Well, I think Final Fantasy is that way for several reasons. Now again, I'm not saying that Final Fantasy has no dickheads, no elitists, you know, no twat waffles running around fucking trying to just, their whole point is to try to ruin experiences for other players. They exist, okay? And they exist in fairly large amounts on any game. But why Final Fantasy gets the reputation for being so positive and such a good, friendly community is, first and foremost, I think it adheres to a community versus game mindset, like the old games used to. Another thing is Final Fantasy XIV is a JRPG, a Japanese role-playing game, so it instantly appeals to a different demographic, both in its art style, its, you know, dialogue, its story, its world, its environment, its spells. Everything about it is typically different than what you'll just typically find in a Western game, MMO or not. So instantly Final Fantasy XIV is attracting a different kind of player. In my opinion, a more old school MMO type of player is attracted to Final Fantasy XIV right from the get-go, before anything else is said and done. But how it caters to player versus environment, not necessarily just PvE, but players against the game, against the bad guys. Even more so, is it makes you the hero in the story in all the cutscenes, I think helps. PvP is not a huge emphasis in the game. It just flat out isn't. And, you know, I'm okay with that. If you, like I've said in other videos, if all you want is PvP, 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 go play World of Warcraft or Call of Duty, okay? Final Fantasy XIV isn't centered around player versus player. It's always improving. Sometimes they take 3 steps back, 1 step forward, but I digress, not important. Another thing I think Final Fantasy XIV does well, and another reason the community is so great and friendly, is because the game incentivizes you to be friendly, to do nice things, to look out for your fellow, you know, guardian of light, or what the fuck have you. First and foremost, you can give commendations to players in your group at the end of each activity, dungeon, you know, deep dungeon, whatever, raid. You can give them commendations for being helpful, for being good. Even if they didn't necessarily help you, but they were good, you're like, wow, that player was fucking great. They did that move, that limit break, or whatever, that clutch moment, I'm going to give them a commendation. And people want commendations, because as you gather commendations, you get mounts, you know, you get pets, you get unique looking gear, you get all kinds of cool things. So it incentivizes people to, you know, to play and to be nice. Another great feature in Final Fantasy XIV, I mentioned it in my new player's guide, is the Novice Network. If you're a brand new player, everyone around you knows, because there's a little icon next to your name. If you're a player that is just returning after a long hiatus and maybe you've dropped out, have no idea what's changed in the game, there's a little marker next to your name there. And people that are dedicated to the game can become mentors, and it's hard to become a mentor. You know, you have to have certain achievements in the game that are a little tedious and take a long time to get, and then you can be a mentor and you're in a chat room for quite a while when you first start playing or come back, where you can ask questions and ask for help, and these people can help you throughout the game, answer any questions you may have, help guide you through dungeons and things like that. That's something that right now no other MMO that I know of, at least a paid-to-play MMO, has right now. Again, I already mentioned the low focus on PvP, but I can't stress it enough. The more competitive people get to beat each other, I think the more toxicity comes out. So, again, I think it's a good thing that PvP is not a gigantic, emphasis in Final Fantasy XIV. Another big thing I think is helping the game's community be positive is there are no factions. They're different races, but you're not pitted against and forced to be enemies with any other player in the game. Which, may not work for all games, but for Final Fantasy, I think it works, stupendously. It was a great decision. Another reason is the Final Fantasy official forums are pretty strict about what you can put out there and what you can't. If you take a quick glance over on the World of Warcraft forums, you'll see just a boiling pot of the worst human shit that's imaginable. Again, anonymity. People can spew whatever they want and act like fucking 2-year-olds, and it's normal. It's the norm. There is some toxicity in any forum, but Square manages that and monitors that much better. Take a look at the Final Fantasy XIV Reddit. The amount of toxicity there compared to not just MMOs, but other games is, it's massively less on the Reddit. So, don't take my word for it. Check it out yourself. I've said it's not perfect. There are assholes and pricks, and there is toxicity. There always will be. But the whole point of this video is Final Fantasy has a reputation of having less and being better and more friendly to new people. Another big thing that I think helps Final Fantasy is the fact that add-ons are against the terms of service in Final Fantasy. So you can have a DPS meter. You're more than welcome to. Technically, you're against terms of service. Square's not going to ban you or fuck you over for it, though. However, the second you use any add-on to either cheat, which, that's a given. You don't want cheaters in the game, or to belittle or degrade another player, you are fucked. So if you have your big dick DPS meters, and it's fine if you're checking your own DPS and you want to push yourself further, totally okay. I'm a big supporter of that. But if you're like looking at everybody else's and instead of going, hey man, let me help you with your rotation, I know what you might be doing wrong, that's okay. I'm fine with that. I have the numbers right here. I can help you. But if you're like, hey, your DPS is 1K or 1500, 2K, what have you, lower than it should be, you're a fucking piece of shit, and you should go suck on a penguin's nutsack because I fucked your mom and you should go die. I mean, apparently everyone's mother is really loose because of how many, these fucking basement-dwelling losers have fucked him, apparently. But, I digress. Back to the point. If you do something like that, they can report you, and you will have your account permanently banned because you're breaking terms of service by having that add-on in the first place. Generally, they don't care, but if you're using it to harass or belittle another player, you're fucked. So that whole section of toxicity is just flat gone from Final Fantasy XIV, and I love that about it. Also, there are things in Final Fantasy XIV that encourage you to play with other players in the game. Things like your roulettes, which other MMOs like World of Warcraft have things like that, dailies that you do and you queue up. However, I've never experienced in World of Warcraft back when I played, I'd be queuing up for a random dungeon and then right when I get in, having the other members of the party say hi, even hi to me, say anything. And I was guilty of the same thing. I just didn't care, like, fuck these guys. That's how toxic, even I became during World of Warcraft. But in this game, the second you join a party, you see people waving, you see people saying hi, people being helpful if you fail on a boss and fuck up. I've seen it way more often, someone helping somebody understand the fight, helping somebody understand the mechanics, than I have telling them that they're a piece of shit and they suck and, they should go hang themselves with dental floss or something like that. So, that, out of the gate, you won't find in a lot of other MMOs. But there's a lot of games, features within Final Fantasy XIV that encourage that. Fates. Gather up as many people in the area as you can to level up together to destroy these fates. Now in Eureka, the notorious monsters that spawn, the hunts, you need other people, so it's good to be courteous and be nice. The fact that player housing exists brings your guild together, your free company together in Final Fantasy XIV, so that you guys can, build an airship to go on these big adventure modes, on your airship with your entire guild. there are just so many. Just having a house in general, being able to buy your own private quarters and then invite your fellow guildmates in to look how you decorate it, shit like that, builds a sense of bonding between players that most other online games just flat out don't have. And you know, then there's the fact that if you join a dungeon or something and another player in that dungeon hasn't completed it, in any other MMO you're like, fuck, I want to leave this dungeon because we're going to be here forever because this guy or bitch doesn't know what the fuck they're doing and they're going to drag me down. In Final Fantasy XIV, it tells you out of the gate, one of these people hasn't completed this duty, so if you complete it with this person, you get a huge bonus of, you know, tomes or gold or whatever to encourage you to help teach them and to finish the dungeon and not just bail on them. I mean, these are just some of the reasons Final Fantasy XIV, I believe, has a strong and healthy community that's friendly more so than it's not friendly. And again, like I said, there are going to be pricks. There are going to be elitists. There are going to be assholes. But the most important aspect to keeping any community of any game friendly and helpful is you, is me, is us. We have to, you know, and you have the anonymity. And that's never something that the internet's going to back down from now. I don't see any games really giving any accountability, forcing accountability on anybody. But fuck all that. Let's you and me and everybody just be a little nicer. Help people be that person that they remember way later on, you know, when they're really good at the game. They're like, I remember this guy. Even if you don't play the game anymore. And you change someone's life for the better when they say, I remember this guy or this chick. They helped me out, you know, and taught me this fight. And then they're going to pay it forward. We're the cure to any game being a shitty community and being toxic. So my advice to everybody is have fun, be yourself, do things that will bring other players up, you know, more so than bring other players down as much as you can. I know it's not really easy because you run into some pretty dense people out there and a lot of assholes and pricks too. Hell, I'm one of them. But do your best and have fun. So guys, that's pretty much my video about Final Fantasy XIV's community. I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts. If you agree, disagree, you tell me to go fuck myself, well, go fuck yourself. One other thing, I know in a bunch of my other videos over the last few weeks, I mentioned the community that I'm in right now, BlackList community, and I did mention in those videos that Final Fantasy XIV we were recruiting, but mainly if you want to, you know, be a part, play with me, play with other people on PS4. It was a PS4 only thing. Well, I'm happy to announce now that that's no longer the case. We are now recruiting Final Fantasy XIV for PC as well. We got a group Discord. So anyway, I'm not going to blabber and blab on about it, you know, and plug the group I'm a part of because it isn't for everybody. But if you play Final Fantasy XIV on PC, if you're on the Corel server on the Aether Data Center, and you're looking for an FC to just chill and have fun with, we're super casual, friendly. Eventually we'll get into Savage Raiding. That's not something we're doing right this second because a lot of our players are new to the game and they're getting up and I'm enjoying helping them. And that's another thing great about Final Fantasy XIV is it's got a lot of stuff to do for people that are hardcore Savage, much like I used to be in Heaven's Word and like I was in World of Warcraft and Shuren's Call and all those other games. And it's got a lot for the casual player too. But if that is something that interests you, of course, you can always check the description down below. It's also on my Twitch page. Speaking of which, make sure to follow me on Twitch and Twitter. My stream schedule is up, both there and here. Blah, 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 blah. You guys get the idea. This has been Raziel. Keep it real. Good talking to you guys.